Today we're going to talk about the endocrine system. And since the endocrine system is the other effector system that causes certain outputs, it's many times compared with the nervous system. Both of these systems function together to coordinate functions in the body. And so one way to help understand the endocrine system is to compare it to the nervous system and the way the nervous system works. And this diagram helps to do that. And if we look at both are controlled centers or respond to controlled centers and feedback. So they're both basically take in data, interpret it, and then send out messages that act or cause changes in activity. Now, one difference between the endocrine system and the nervous system is the speed with which the two react. As you can see in the diagram, the nervous system is very fast. The endocrine system is very slow. The nervous system uses neurotransmitters. The endocrine system uses hormones. The effectors that are affected are muscles and glandular secretion versus metabolic activities, growth, and development. The influence is brief versus long-acting. And then lastly, the nervous system is generally confined to muscles and various glands, whereas the endocrine system can actually impact virtually every cell in the body in some way. And here's another way to look at the two. There's overlap in that they both have chemical messengers. They both use feedback loops. They both regulate both physiologic activities and maintain homeostasis and respond to stimuli. The endocrine system, again, is slow and uses hormones. The nervous system is fast and uses neurotransmitters. The endocrine system, the strength of the system, of the signal that goes out to the body is based on the amount of hormone that's released. This is different than the nervous system that has a all or nothing response and uses various frequencies, spatial and temporal frequencies, in order to moderate the strength of the signal. The target cells for the endocrine system, which are the cells that are affected by the hormone, they must have appropriate receptors or binding sites that allow for the hormone to bind and cause the effect. The endocrine system can repair itself if injured. The nervous system generally has much more difficulty repairing itself. I can't really say that it cannot repair itself, but its ability to repair itself is significantly less than the endocrine system. Now, this is just an overview of the major endocrine centers. The first of these is behind the pituitary gland, high. It's actually part of the brain and part of the endocrine system, known as the pineal gland. Just below the pineal gland and in front of it is the part of the brain that controls the pituitary, and it is called the hypothalamus. Then below is the pituitary gland, which has an anterior and posterior lobe. The thyroid gland is in the neck, and inside the thyroid gland is something called the parathyroid gland. There are actually 4 parathyroid glands. Above the kidneys are the adrenal glands. Below the kidneys and part of the digestive system is the pancreas. In males, we have the testis, and in females, we have the ovary. And these are responsible for reproduction and reproductive hormones. Now, when we look at the hypothalamus and the hypothalamic centers, we run into something that regulates the pituitary. Now, in addition to regulating the pituitary, the hypothalamus also secretes its own hormones. The regulation of the pituitary is by means of something called releasing hormones. So the hypothalamus will secrete something called thyroid releasing hormone. This travels down to the pituitary and tells the pituitary to release thyroid stimulating hormone. Similarly, the hypothalamus will release a hormone known as cortisol releasing hormone or corticotropin releasing hormone. Travels down to the pituitary and tells the pituitary to release ACTH or adrenocorticotropic hormone, etc. But then the hypothalamus also can release inhibiting hormones and tell the pituitary to secrete less hormone. Now, this shows the posterior pituitary, which is just an extension of the hypothalamus. And what you see is the actual axons come down into this part of the stalk through something called the infundibulum, and then release hormone directly into the bloodstream. Now, this is the posterior pituitary, and it's a neurologic part of the pituitary, or part of the brain, part of the hypothalamus. It's made up of nervous tissue, and it secretes two hormones. The two hormones it secretes are ADH, or antidiuretic hormone, and oxytocin. ADH and oxytocin are released in response to signals from the body. If the body senses that it does not have enough water on board, it will release antidiuretic hormone, and the antidiuretic hormone acts on the kidney to increase the reabsorption of water in the body and decrease urine output. Oxytocin, on the other hand, is related to reproduction, and in females it causes a contraction of the uterus during birth and also causes the contraction of the glands in the breast for the expression of breast milk. These two hormones are hormones secreted by the hypothalamus, the posterior pituitary gland, and affect directly the body itself. The rest of the hormones secreted by the hypothalamus travel down into the anterior pituitary and affect its output. The anterior pituitary produces many hormones. One that most people know about is growth hormone, or GH. This induces growth in most tissues. Growth hormone has been used to try to increase muscle mass in weightlifters and also to increase muscle strength. Now, if the growth hormone is given before the bone plates close in childhood, then it causes an increase in stature. If it occurs after that, the height of the person doesn't actually change, but other sites grow. The pituitary also secretes thyroid stimulating hormone that acts on the thyroid and causes it to release its hormone, which is called thyroxine. The adrenocorticotropic hormone, or ACTH, acts on the adrenal cortex and causes it to release cortisol. Luteinizing hormone is a hormone that's released by the anterior pituitary. It acts on both the ovary and the uterus, and it prepares the ovary and the uterus for reproduction. The follicle stimulating hormone acts on the ovary and stimulates egg maturation and estrogen production. And so it's necessary for the female to ovulate. If follicle stimulating hormone is not present, then the ovary will not produce an egg and will not ovulate. And lack of follicle stimulating hormone is one of the causes for a lack of a female having normal periods. Prolactin is also produced by the anterior pituitary, and it tells the mammary glands to produce milk. And then lastly, there's melanocyte stimulating hormone, or MSH, which causes the skin to darken. Now here is the thyroid gland. It also shows that in the back of the thyroid gland there are 4 parathyroid glands. The thyroid gland is essentially wrapped around the windpipe, right about the level of the thyroid cartilage. Thyroxine is secreted by the thyroid gland, and when thyroxine is secreted, it tells the whole body to increase its metabolic production. So when a person has excess thyroid hormone around, their thyroid production or their heart rate increases, they become sweaty, they have trouble sleeping, they lose weight, etc. Calcitonin is also released by the thyroid. Calcitonin is stimulated to release by the presence of decreased calcium, and it tells the osteoclast to quit resorbing calcium, and thus increases the calcium in the blood. Decreases the calcium in the blood. The slide is incorrect. It decreases the calcium in the blood. Parathyroid hormone is secreted in response to low calcium, and it acts on the bone to increase the calcium in the blood. Calcitonin and parathyroid hormone are antagonistic hormones. Parathyroid hormone is produced by the parathyroids, but calcitonin is produced by the thyroid. This is the adrenal gland. The adrenal gland actually produces several hormones. It has 3 zones, as is shown here, and each zone produces a different hormone. We will not talk about all the hormones that are produced by the adrenal gland. Cortisol is produced by the middle part of the cortex, and it is increased in times of stress. This increases protein and fat use, increases the body's glucose, and prepares it for stress times. By stress, I mean things like starvation, infection, etc. Aldosterone is produced by the outer part of the cortex. It acts on the kidney to increase sodium retention and increases blood pressure. Epinephrine is not secreted by the cortex, it's secreted by the adrenal medulla, and it increases the metabolism very rapidly and prepares the body for what's known as the fight or flight response. It increases the heart rate, respiratory rate, and it is a fast-acting hormone compared to thyroid, which is a slower-acting hormone, having generally the same effect. This is the pancreas. The pancreas actually has 2 functions. It has both an endocrine function, which we'll talk about today, and an exocrine function, which we'll talk about when we talk about the digestive system. The endocrine function comes from what's called the beta cells, or islets of Langerhans cells, which are shown on the right here, and it produces 2 hormones, insulin and glucagon. Insulin acts to decrease the blood glucose level. It causes glucose to enter into the cells and causes the body or the cells to use the glucose. Glucagon, on the other hand, mobilizes glucose and acts to increase the glucose production. Both of these are secreted by cells in these beta cells in the islets of Langerhans. And they are, again, antagonistic hormones that act together to control body glucose. At the same time, the pancreas also has these ductal cells, which are exocrine gland function. We talked about the difference between endocrine gland, which secretes directly into the blood, and exocrine gland, which secretes into a duct. These ductal cells secrete enzymes for the breakdown of food, as well as bicarbonate to neutralize the acid that's produced by the stomach.